Hi, Samson. Good afternoon. Good evening, Samson. Good evening, Francesco from Europe. Good afternoon from for US.
Hello,
Hey,
everyone.
Alessandro.
Hi.
How are you doing, Samson?
Not bad. You?
Great to have you here. I don't think you need so much introduction. CEO John Tree and specialize in nation state adoption. I think with the more time passing, the more your role that has been always important will be more and more important. And I think maybe we can start with the big news we had last week for strategic Bitcoin reserve in US. How do you see this step? How profound is this change for Bitcoin adoption?
Well, the establishment of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve in the US is a major inflection point. And I don't think people have fully understood the change, or they're questioning if it's enough with an executive order or if it needs a bill like the Lummis Bitcoin bill to pass Congress. But I think the main thing, which Adam Back pointed out, is that it's a big shift of the Overton window, if not destroying the Overton window, about what Bitcoin is and its role in the world. So with the establishment of the Bitcoin Reserve in any form factor, I think it's a signal that Bitcoin is here to stay, absolutely. And it is going to become a key part of national treasuries and national strategies. Everything that a country does is going to have to incorporate Bitcoin in some way. Now, I believe that we saw a shift already with the ETFs, which is BlackRock, effectively the largest asset manager on the planet, signaling that Bitcoin is a legitimate asset class. But the SBR is signaling that Bitcoin is a new form of reserve asset for major accumulation targets to be held as a strategic asset for countries.
Great. I share the same opinion. Is a profound shift for the whole world on Bitcoin. And how do you see also the shift? It looks like the shift from crypto and Bitcoin to Bitcoin is going quite fast in the US government. They started with this crypto reserve and also with this unfortunate Trump coin. For me, like it's kind of the price to pay to be focused also on Bitcoin. But then in few days they moved. Also, Howard Lutnick said there will be a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We had the Bitcoin reserve differentiated by crypto, and they said that they shall explore new ways to acquire new Bitcoin, and they will not acquire new crypto. So it looks like the crypto phase is fading and fading towards a Bitcoin phase from the US.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would say that the U.S. as a whole, the U.S. government is kind of speed running the whole crypto journey. A lot of Bitcoiners went through the phase of doing shitcoins and then going to
Yes.
Bitcoin, and some go back to shitcoins, of course, either overtly or covertly. But this whole process of Trump launching the meme coin, and then all the talk about a crypto reserve and everything leading up to basically what I say is the ideal case for us. It's everything we wanted. You have a strategic Bitcoin reserve on one side and a crypto stockpile on the other side, which is right now just all seized assets. So it's a very clear distinction that the reserve is quality. And I think that was the only way that they could have done it. I've done a lot of thinking about what would happen or what needs to happen to create a crypto reserve. And it comes down to creating a list of criteria that can be followed almost mathematically to define what goes into a crypto reserve. And there is no really good way to do it. The only way I thought that you can do that and not just pick Bitcoin is to define it as proof of reserve, proof of work coins. So things like Bitcoin, Litecoin, etc., etc. And even then, you have to have certain thresholds. Like these things cannot be spun up instantly. They have to be dominant in their hash rate, in their hashing function, and they have to have been around for some time, and they have to, not be easily manipulatable. Otherwise, the whole thing can be gamed, right? If you just say crypto reserve is proof of work coins, then any proof of stake coin can suddenly bolt on a proof of work function that does absolutely nothing, and it can just be gamed a lot. So to do the crypto reserve would have been a difficult task, I think, to define the criteria. Otherwise, Ripple can be in, any meme coin can be in, and it just becomes a joke. So maybe the working group came to the same conclusion, and they decided to do this split. But it is exactly what we wanted. That crypto is in one side, Bitcoin is in the other side, and I couldn't think of a better outcome than what we've got.
That's also, I think people who are focused on Bitcoin and also they are in favor of this nation state adoption. Also, they think if you are an expert, you think honestly it's also less than 2 months since the inauguration. So we got so many news. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, they said that they will acquire in not budget neutral. I heard many, they were complaining because they didn't say how many Bitcoin and by when. But okay, let's give him also some time. It's already a lot that they say they will acquire. And also this Matt Hooger from Bitvisor wrote, he posted the executive order, and it was written shall, not may or can explore new ways. So it is an order. That's super important, the terminology. It's an order to acquire, and they are super happy to execute this order. So for me, it will be like, it will happen. It's not it may happen or it can happen. We are waiting at the announcement that can come in a few weeks or few months. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the way that it's framed and phrased is also very tactical. Right now, the budget, deficit, interest payments, the economy, these are all top of mind subjects. So it would be irresponsible for them to say, we're going to go and buy a lot of Bitcoin. I mean, if you're a normie, it would look irresponsible. If you're a Bitcoiner, it is the natural thing to do. But you have to factor in that most of the world is still made up of normies. So you have to cater to their perception of what is normal and what is acceptable. So by just creating the reserve and saying we're moving seized assets in and we're going to stop selling, I think is the palatable thing for the masses, right? If you just said we're going to make this and we're going to go buy a lot of Bitcoin, a lot of people would freak out, and you have the opposition that will use that to their advantage and attack. So this is kind of the way to dip the toes into the Bitcoin market. And as you're saying, they shall find budget neutral ways or revenue neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin, which actually gives them a very broad playing field to do, because there are so many different things you can do. You can make a Bitcoin bond. I think the guy that proposed it is calling them bit bonds for the US, but that is one way. You could use excess energy to mine Bitcoin. There's just a lot of things you can play with to create a budget neutral or revenue neutral stream of Bitcoin income. But yeah, like the act from Cynthia Lummis, the Bitcoin Act, I think that will be a more mainstream test of political palatability for buying Bitcoin actively, because that is what that bill is for. And that will go to Congress. There are already, I think, 6 senators signed up to support the bill. So we'll see if their constituents talk to them and say it's a good thing, and we see more senators come on board. But that's kind of the test to see if the market is ready, the US public is ready for a directed Bitcoin acquisition strategy.
So because 200,000 per year is a significant amount in Bitcoin. Maybe even if it doesn't pass, it doesn't mean that US will never acquire, but maybe a smaller amount. I think it will be great also if some from the Democrats should join this bill, because it's important that it remain bipartisan. Bitcoin should be for everyone. It should not be a flag of a government. For sure, the government should push, but
yeah,
it will be great to have both.
I think go ahead.
There was a Bitcoin for America conference was it yesterday? Yesterday, I think. Things happen so fast. But there were Democrats there speaking too. So it seems to be that Bitcoin will be a bipartisan issue.
Also, Scaramucci in a recent interview said one of the reasons why I think that it will be in favor, the US will go with acquire new Bitcoin, because also Democrats want. And there are also posts in X where there are politicians from the Democrats that say the same. Bitcoin should be for everyone. One thing is other politics from Trump, but on Bitcoin we should be together. So interesting time ahead. Francesco, what is?
No, I think that the keyword this stage is shock, because the whole world didn't expect the most advanced country in the West to be at the same level of El Salvador, which was the one of the poorest country from this perspective. This is a bit shocking. And this creates polarization and asymmetry, which is something it takes some time to digest. And I think the price is absolutely reflecting that. There is a risk at this stage that there could be a Bitcoin could become a political argument. So if you like Bitcoin, it's because of Trump, you are right wing. So this is going to happen, I think, in the short term. But I think Trump was a very good skill, and we saw it with the terms of the order of people below him. So they will not. They will make this as minimal as possible. I have two questions for you. One is that regarding the acquisition of Bitcoin, do you think it can be linked directly to the US Treasury bond in dollars, like the T-bills or what they're selling? And also, because I saw post of you that's a bit difficult question, maybe, but to ask you is about, because you spent so much effort on El Salvador. And now there is this asymmetry, which is positive for us, but it looks like some people are starting not to believe in that much because of the IMF signature of the president. And if you have any other information we don't have on that situation, and how do you see it, and how it's going to impact the development a bit in the West and in Salvador as well? Thank you.
Yeah, so which one should I start from? Maybe we continue the first one. So what was the first question again?
Yeah, the US bond, the normal T-bills to be used to fund the Bitcoin purchase.
Right. So the proposal right now is for something called a bit bond, and the proposal is saying the government should issue $2 trillion of debt and allocate 10% to Bitcoin. So it's similar to the Bitcoin bonds that I did design for El Salvador. The difference is it's a far bigger scale, 2 trillion to 1 billion. And the dynamics of it is different too, because the US is the money printer of the world. So they can actually do that, and they have far more advantages to issue debt to buy Bitcoin. Whereas for El Salvador, the design was more so for a developing country that needed to show the ability to pay the coupon, right? Like, you don't really worry that much as an investor, either institutional or corporate, that the US is not going to pay because they can print to pay. Other countries that can't print to pay coupon or interest, they need a solid revenue stream. So the design of the El Salvador Bitcoin bonds was more that there is a revenue stream from mining, tapping into geothermal, that can support the 10-year duration. And the allocation to Bitcoin was far higher. It's 50% versus 10% in the US bit bond design. But you have to kind of maximize the Bitcoin allocation to maximize the attractiveness and maximize the potential payout for cases like developing countries, like El Salvador. For the US, I think 10% I would still say is a bit low. I would say 20% allocation to Bitcoin, but their target seems to be to look like a far more conservative investment vehicle. You're getting 1% interest, and it's tax advantaged. And the Bitcoin part is a small part. It will be a significant part, but is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. So if you're not bullish on Bitcoin, you can kind of think, well, it's okay. It's not dangerous, risky, and scary. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But if the US does issue their Bitcoin bonds, I think that might preclude the ability for developing nations to do so, because US debt is superior. So there will be a challenge to market and place emerging market Bitcoin bonds compared to first world Bitcoin bonds that are far more attractive and stable. I don't know what your thoughts were, but that's kind of my take.
I think saying nobody can compete when you have, the best economy issuing the bond. Why should I buy the Salvador bond? And that's there is a polarization. So there will be this, but what's that will benefit eventually everyone. We
Yeah.
can say that in the short to middle term it can be challenging, but I think the long term benefit everyone. So can you expand more on the situation El Salvador currently about the current issue, the IMF loan and the terms there? What do you see there?
Right. So it's very unclear what exactly is going on right now. So there was a lack of communication and transparency in recent times with the changes to everything in El Salvador, like the edits to the Bitcoin law, basically making it voluntary, and also the IMF agreement. So a lot of people, like on X, Twitter, were just speculating and analyzing available data because there was no official communication, no serious official communication from the mouthpiece of the El Salvador government. So reading through the IMF agreement, and it is not like a declaration from the IMF or demand from the IMF. This is actually an agreement that the government of El Salvador agreed to. If you read it, it's written from their perspective. So if they didn't agree to it, they should not have agreed to it. If they did agree to it, then you would assume as a rational person that they will abide by it. And there is no loophole available in there that allows them to continue buying. So I just kind of said, the buying would stop. And other people said the same thing. They came to the same conclusion. But then President Bukele said they won't stop this. And by this, it sounds like he's alluding to the buying, not directly, but indirectly. So there is definitely some conflict there because the agreement says one thing and president says another thing. And both of these things can't be true. There are only a few possible loopholes. And again, the Bitcoiners at X are very savvy and sharp when it comes to analyzing every piece of Bitcoin data available. So the loophole, not really loopholes, but the ways to keep acquiring or stacking would be to, one, transfer from existing wallets, private wallets. I think Joe Nakamoto came up with that theory first. The second is that these are donations. The third is that the IMF agreement doesn't matter and it's just a suggestion. The fourth is that these are just donations, but that does not seem to be that plausible. And then what was the fifth one? There was a fifth one too, but it is also not that plausible. So yeah, I think the most likely it's a transfer, but they're saying that it is they're actually buying, but we don't also know what price they're buying at too. That's never been disclosed or anything like any buy details. So you do see the wallet address public and it is increasing in its holdings, but it's not like Michael Saylor when he says, we bought Bitcoin and at this price and our average cost is this. There is not that level of granularity to it. So yeah, there are a lot of questions and I don't have the answers. So I don't know is my answer to what's going on in El Salvador right now.
Could be a political strategy, like really. Somebody gives you a loan, and then if I don't I buy it. Maybe they don't give me the next loan, but this loan, there's nothing I can do. And if there is a bit of risk in it, like leaning on the U.S. situation, because at the end of the day, it's the U.S. dollar 50%. They will see Trump being there as a support for. Rediscussing the terms of the loan in the next months, maybe, while doing some other tricks. Could be.
Well, the IMF came back with a statement saying El Salvador is compliant. So, they are, in the eyes of the IMF, complying with the agreement. So I don't know what that means exactly, but it's not just this one loan. There are, I think, $3.5 billion of loans that are coming to El Salvador over the next year or two. And I think a lot of those are to service existing debt, which actually has ballooned in the last 4 years. I think their debt has grown by more than 50% in the last 4 years alone. So they need the loans to service the debt, definitely. But a lot of these things are not really talked about, right? Like, you'll always see the news come out, El Salvador is buying or stacking or adding. But there's no news about the debt situation, which is kind of, maybe Bitcoiners don't care, but that is a reality. And Bitcoin News.com, they actually posted a thread on El Salvador, and they were the first I saw that outlined the debt situation. And that makes sense that El Salvador needs to get the IMF loans in order to not default. But then, maybe defaulting is a good thing because the debt is so crushing, and it would be the Rothbardian thing to do, to default and reset and endure some short-term pain for long-term prosperity. Otherwise, you just have to keep borrowing to service the debt, or hope your Bitcoin holdings allow you to pay off the debt eventually.
I see. Well, there are many theories and not have an answer, but did the whole thing let you down, or something? Did you feel a bit betrayed by the situation, or you trust that there is a state secret that we don't know? And if he's putting forward this public image saying that they're keeping buying, and he has been a man of his word, this thing will hold up and eventually will turn up positively.
Well, I
That's
can
all.
definitely say it would be nice to have more transparency and visibility into what's happening, other than just saying it's a test of faith. Have faith, because Bitcoiners like to verify. It's just in our DNA. Um, I don't fault President Bukele or anybody in the government that they need to take the IMF loan if that's what they think is best for the country. If the goal is to not default, then that is what you have to do. The cognitive disconnect for me is like, you did that and now you're seemingly not following it, but you are following it. So that's the part I can't reconcile. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners in El Salvador have the same question, but it's not a popular question. Like, anybody asking that question gets a lot of blowback from the supporters that just support regardless.
Yeah, let's think that we as a Bitcoiner are not compatible with state nation secrets. So this is a nation
Yeah.
secret. He has a strategy here, and eventually we'll find out. So, Alessandro, we have another question. Can change
We,
the topic.
we like to verify.
Yeah, we like to verify, but all of this is public, right? The
Without
fifth
any funds.
the fifth possibility was that their holdings are not public holdings; they're private holdings. But that doesn't make any sense at all. But that would be the other loophole, quote unquote, that allows them to keep adding to it. But I don't think that's a possibility. But given that all of these are public funds, they will be disclosed. Like, everything that's happening will come out eventually. It's not going to be locked up under key. Like, if there is a new president in 4 years' time, a lot of these things will come to light, or the next president after that. But eventually, all of these things will be public because it is public money that they're working with. It's not meant to be a secret what they're doing with public money.
We will see then. Another question I had was, now that we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think will help also your work for the future for nation state adoption, that we have a clear example from actually the most powerful country in the world. Where will be now the focus for you for the next month, on if you can, what you can share?
Yeah, well, I would say definitely. We're always engaging with politicians and governments around the world. Just last night, we had a call with a former head of state in a country that I can't disclose, but they weren't aware of the thing. So it's kind of like we're the reporter telling them, "Hey, guess what? In the U.S., the SBR happened," and then the next day they're talking about Bitcoin bonds for the US and buying $200 billion worth of Bitcoin. So a lot, like, people kind of forget that we are odd. We're kind of psychopaths and weirdos, that we're paying attention to all this news, but normal people don't know. So you have to kind of relay the information about what's happening.
True. I also appreciate when you say for normal people is completely different for what is for Bitcoiners. Also, we still kind of live in a echo chamber with all the news in X.
Yeah,
99% of the population doesn't know all about the strategic Bitcoin reserve or know very little. But
yeah,
but I think also now it's more and more people will come out from the shadow because it will also for financial advice or institution and so on. Now, like 1 year ago, before the ETF, if they were even in favor privately, they could not go publicly supporting Bitcoin because they could risk their career.
yeah,
But now, to put 1 or 2% in Bitcoin, you have Larry Fink discussing not only creating the ETF, but also going national television sponsoring IBIT. We had also the White House that also they did this great this post saying Bitcoin superpower of the world that they didn't need to do, but they
yeah.
did. So they are sending a clear message. So I guess for all these people who privately are now at least not against in Bitcoin, it will be easier to show up. And I also assume it will be harder and harder to justify 0% in Bitcoin. Okay, for some, they should not go maybe 10, 20, 30%. For Bitcoin, also here, if someone is going 3% in Bitcoin, as Bitcoiner, we say, okay, you're missing out on 97%. But for a normal population, 3 or 5% is more than enough. And now it will be hard to justify always no 0%.
Yeah, well, there is also the possibility that a lot of people will stay on 0%, but they'll have indirect exposure, like their pension
Yeah.
fund will have bought Bitcoin, right? So
Yeah.
whether you like it or not, Bitcoin is coming, and whether you accept it or not, it's still coming. Like it's just going to be in everything you have, like if there are UST bills with Bitcoin in them, like the Bit bond,
True.
then it's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous at that point, and it's not about whether you want to put 1% in or not. You just have 1% exposure, and there's already precedent with this. A number of pension funds around the world have Bitcoin exposure in some form or fashion. Like the largest Korean pension fund, I think, has a MicroStrategy. So it's not direct; it's MicroStrategy, but MicroStrategy
Still,
has a lot of Bitcoin.
yes.
And this is just a trend that we're going to keep seeing. But it is that Overton window shift. It's becoming that Bitcoin is an acceptable thing to be talked about as a reserve asset, not just an investment vehicle, not something like a tech stock, but as a national reserve like gold. And I think that has a lot of market impact that has not yet been realized or felt.
Agree. And on this, how do you think we are far from this inflection point where at one point, I guess, there will be enough adoption that people will be like the Bitcoin rush, like the gold rush in 1860, but it will be much more powerful and brutal because we have the ETF. Everyone can buy in 2 minutes Bitcoin or have a call with financial advisor. Could it be that it happens already in 2025, or we should wait more?
Well, I think it's either 25 or 26. Like
Okay,
it
yes.
feels like everything is coming to a head, that this change is coming very rapidly. And it's not a change that is really voluntary. If you look at Bitcoin from a nation state perspective, it is a necessity.
Yeah.
So why was a major part of Trump's campaign about uh, reducing the debt and fixing the spending? It's because it's gotten to the point where even normal people are realizing that it's getting broken, right? Like you would think that it'd be realized that the few $1 trillion debt mark, but it's at 36.5 now, and that's when people are starting to kind of realize that the economy is breaking, things are getting more expensive, and it's really not going to get better. And I think even initiatives like the Department of Government Efficiency is not going to really make a difference. Trump wants to drop the 10-year rate on treasuries, and I don't even think that's going to make a difference. It's like you're inflating balloons, not like you know big heavy duty industrial balloons, but party balloons, the ones that are like this big and they're helium filled under the Titanic as it's sinking to kind of slow it down. You know, maybe you buy yourselves a few seconds, but it's still coming down. So yeah, I definitely think there's like a faction in the government that is fully aware that it is crashing down, and maybe the things like Department of Government Efficiency, cost cutting, and all these things are a way to kind of show that things are happening as they prepare the path to transition to Bitcoin, right? You have to show things are happening, but the real solution is to transition to Bitcoin, to rebase to Bitcoin as the underlying asset and reprice everything to Bitcoin. That's the only way out of that $36 trillion of debt and economic woe. So yeah, it's a necessity. It's not this like, it's not lip service, right? I think it is really the only way, and I think there are people that are aware of that.
Okay. So as Lynn Alden says, nothing stopped this train. They have 2 trillion deficit. For if they cut, it will be helpful, but not enough.
Yeah,
It's
I
too late,
mean,
let's say.
compound interest is pretty powerful, you know.
Yes, they have, last year he passed the defense, and the U.S. defense cost is 900 billion. That's already is an immense amount.
Yeah.
Also, one of the best quote I read in the last 12 months was till now, till 2021, 22, 23, we saw many people like us, some also earlier, they really proactively join Bitcoin. They become more interested. But more and more with the time passing, people will not adopt Bitcoin because they are in favor of Bitcoin, but because they don't want to suffer the consequence of not having Bitcoin. Similar to what Saif Dinamo said, that it's like gunpowder. At one point, everyone was adopting because if you didn't have gunpowder, you will lose the war, regardless of what you do.
Yeah, I think Alvaro Maria said the same thing in his book too. Like, Bitcoin is gunpowder. You either have it or you don't, and deal with the consequences of not having that. But another thing is that with this shift in the disposition of the U.S. to Bitcoin, I think it's really going to trigger other countries to follow suit.
Yes.
Because wait, let me go back one step. So right now we actually don't know how much Bitcoin the U.S. has. All of the figures around the world of all these national holdings, they are all estimates, and none of them are really up to date or even that accurate. But the efforts to understand how much Bitcoin the U.S. has will go a long way in defining how other countries are accounting and managing and publicly announcing their holdings. So once we find out exactly how much the US has, like the number that's thrown out there a lot is 200,000 ish, but 95,000 of that is earmarked to be returned to Bitfinex. So that leaves the US with 100 something thousand, maybe. But there's also that the US Marshals have been selling a lot of Bitcoin, and even they themselves don't know how much Bitcoin they have. So maybe the US only has 50 or 30,000. Who knows? But we'll find out. And once we find out, I would expect that you'll kind of get this this monthly statement from governments around the world, or some form of attestation saying, here's how much Bitcoin we have, and here's a monthly snapshot going forward. And maybe that's also signed too, that they're signing a message cryptographically to prove that they still have access to those funds. But it'd be cool to see what China really has, because there are theories out there that China doesn't have 195,000 coins, that they sold it before. Their coins were mostly seized from Plus Token, but there have obviously been other seizures over the last few years too, but they're probably smaller, but maybe it adds up. But just knowing how much Bitcoin every country has is going to be a very interesting thing for us to watch. And then just seeing the pressure to be more transparent, because if the US has, let's say, 50,000 coins actually, and China really does have 195,000, it's in the best interest of China to provide the best attestation that they have that much, right? Because they want to emphasize that we have more than you. And I think this phenomenon will keep continuing, kind of as a competition between the countries to, one, have the most Bitcoin, and two, be the most transparent and clear on them having that much Bitcoin.
Looking for its game theory in playing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just maybe another topic, but I think it's an important question because you have released the amazing wallet, Aqua Wallet now, where there is a Tether, Bitcoin. So it's clear to everybody that the role of Tether in the developing countries to make the dollar circulate to the banking. But this stage, then it was, there were many opposition in the West, much opposition to Tether. Now, what do you think the USDT role is going to be in the US? Do you think it can act as a bridge to tighten the gap between crypto data logic banking, given that they hold 30% of Bitcoin, the treasury, and also they utilize the Lightning Network now to move the USDT on top of Lightning or Bitcoin, and how do you think is going to unfold in the US?
Yeah, I should. I need to do some more reading, but there is legislation being put forth to regulate stablecoins in the U.S. But I haven't followed up that closely. I've been too busy. But we'll see how that plays out, and that will largely inform the role of stablecoins in the U.S. But I mean, what stablecoins do is that they put pressure on the traditional banking system to up the game, right? They have to just be more performant and be able to function faster, right? Because the benefit of using a stablecoin in a developed economy is really just the fastest settlement possible between parties that do business with one another or are trading with one another. So that is really the main use case, I would say, in a developed country. Not so much for payments, because you already have Visa and Venmo and everything like that works well for small payments. But I still think the biggest value proposition for stablecoins like Tether is in emerging markets and developing economies. And this is why we built Aqua with a focus on Bitcoin and stablecoins, because Tether has really opened up the market for Bitcoin adoption, right? People are not looking for Bitcoin in these markets. They're just looking to use something that they know that they can access that protects them and allows them to transact freely. So they want Tether, they want USDT, and they don't really care what rail it's on, if it's on Tron or Ethereum. Well, they care if it's expensive, but we have Tether on Liquid. We've had that for some time now, and now it's coming to Lightning. So I would think that the superior rail should win at the end. But the opportunity for us as Bitcoiners is that we can tap into this 400 million user market that Tether opened up and give them Bitcoin. That's why in Aqua you have Bitcoin as savings at the top, and then layer 2, and then Tether. So if you get Aqua as a stablecoin wallet and you're just using it for stablecoins, you're always seeing Bitcoin in the thing, and you're seeing the Bitcoin price, and hopefully you decide to swap some into Bitcoin. But I think it's just an opportunity for us that most Bitcoin wallets have largely ignored. And this is why most of the Tether volume is on, altcoin wallets. And unless we do something, it's not going to change. So I think you have to understand that there is, one, an innate demand for dollar value in the world. And two, it is an opportunity. It's not like it's a bad thing. If you really sit back and distill it, every Bitcoin wallet that supports fiat, it's the same as using Tether, right? It's just a different rail. Either using IBAN to transfer fiat, or you're using SEPA, or you're using ACH or whatever, or a database. But it's all fiat. It doesn't really matter where that fiat is. It's the same thing. So there's nothing bad about a Bitcoin wallet having Tether in it, especially if it's on a side chain or over Lightning.
I want this is an important point for our listeners because we live in Europe. I want to share that that unfortunately what happened with this because of this financial pressure in Europe was that they started to speed up the CBDC. That's a big issue. So and they're not going to make it. So being engaged in J3. Information about this education to the government. Do you foresee a campaign for Europe in the next year to avoid these things happening? It's a serious question. Please help us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's What I think it is like we acknowledge that we Bitcoiners live in our own little echo chamber, right? We're talking about Bitcoin every day. I imagine it's the same in the European Central Bank and the European government. Like they probably have their own echo chamber, and they think that like they say we're gonna make a CBDC, and everyone around them is saying it's a great idea. Like we're using technology, and it's gonna be great, and this is why they keep that idea going. But if they step back a bit and look at the implementation of CBDCs around the world, they always fail. The CBDC in China has zero usage. It's still Alipay and WeChat Pay, which is private rails. In Nigeria, their e-naira failed to the point where the government had to kind of crack down on cash and incentivize usage through coercion. So if you're looking at the world and you're studying recent history, you know that it doesn't work. So the question really is, are they going to crack down on physical cash and force you to use it or what? But given the change in the US, and I think they're sensing that fear now, given the change in the US, I think it makes a Euro CBDC even less likely to succeed, even though the probability was already near zero. Because now it's not about Bitcoin. You could just use a US dollar stablecoin in Europe too, and there are also Euro stablecoins too. But it comes down to the question, like, can you just stop information? Like, you can stop exchanges from having the USDT or whatever other stablecoin, but you can't stop people from having stablecoins in their own non-custodial wallet, right? So if a merchant in Europe takes a stablecoin as payment, then me as a visitor there, I can give them that stablecoin, right? And you can't really stop that. If everyone is doing it, what can you do? Not really nothing. So it's not really about Bitcoin. Like I think the war for the European Central Bank is everything. It's Bitcoin is probably like the furthest threat because there is no need for Bitcoin as a payment method in developed countries. It's more about developing countries where it's a necessity and it is that common language that you can speak to with local people to pay them. But in Europe, you don't really need Bitcoin to pay. You can already use digital euros and you can use stablecoins. So I think they have a lot of bigger battles to fight than with Bitcoin.
So you're just gonna fail, waste time, waste money, and let the project fail as it will. Because also full of all the people in Europe, they cannot ban cash. People, 90 years old people, they will riot. So it's just going to fail. There is no reason to all that. Yeah.
Well,
okay, thank you.
Unless something changes, like the political climate, it feels like it's shifting a little bit to more common sense base. So maybe there's a resurgence of common sense and these things kind of get killed before they can take off. But we'll see. It's interesting times right now. Sorry for you guys, but it's interesting times.
We will see. Yeah. I also believe that it will fail. Now we will see. And also, if we really implemented this year in October, I doubt. See.
Yeah, but there's a lot we can do. Like all the Bitcoin wallets can start to make it easier for people to offboard from the legacy system into Bitcoin and stablecoins, right? So we might add a VI ban feature into Aqua just to save our friends in the EU so they can get into Bitcoin easily and quickly. But there's a lot of things we can do. Peer-to-peer trading apps should step up their game. But if you want to do something, there are things that can be done immediately to fight against this push to control and police everybody at the monetary level.
Thank you.
We are approaching the last minutes of the interview. One question is related to one topic you said, or the inflection point. You specified 2025 or 2026. So if we follow the cycles, we see that in 2017 it was 20K, it went to 3K. Then 2021, 69K. 2022 after FTX, 15.5K. people are still promoter of cycles. They're still saying that it would be they could be minus 70% drawback from the all-time high that we will reach this year. Do you think is possible, is always possible, but likely, or could happen, or maybe the cycle are or gone or different?
I don't really believe in cycles, and I don't want to say the word super cycle, but I think whatever happens is not necessarily going to repeat. Bitcoin has grown to such a level that none of the previous cycles really can be mapped out to the level of adoption we have. Like, I have a model that I want to publish soon. It's going to be called Omega 60, but we don't use data from the first cycle because I think it's just too raw and too immature. Like, there was no real market back then, right? So you could discount the first cycle, and then you have two cycles that kind of look alike, and that doesn't guarantee that the third or fourth or fifth, if there are cycles, resemble that too. So we'll see what happens, but the magnitude of adoption right now just doesn't seem to fit into the standard cycle. Like, the pace at which Bitcoin is being adopted is just so fast. Like, you have like you said, we have the SPR after 2 months of the Trump administration coming in. That's like a rocket speed on political timelines, that they're moving this quickly, right? And I think David Sachs said the same thing. Like, the government right now is moving at tech speed, and if the Bitcoin bill from Cynthia Lummis passes, then that unlocks even more capital allocation to Bitcoin. And then if they decide to do something like a Bitcoin bond in the US, that's even more. Like, how much Bitcoin is $200 billion at today's price? That's like 3 million something Bitcoin. So, and at the same time, Saylor is also trying to deploy another, 20 billion? I have lost track now, but
21, yes.
Yeah, another 21. And then you have other countries starting to deploy too. So what makes you think that we're going to repeat the cycle of the past where none of this has happened and have that drawdown? Maybe we do have a drawdown. So my prediction was this year or next year, we can go to 1 million. Maybe you have a 50% drawdown, right? From 1 million to 500K.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
That's fine.
Yeah.
For Bitcoiners will be fine. We are there since 10K, 20K, 30K, no? So.
Yeah. But the thing you have to really understand is the composition of the hodlers of Bitcoin is totally different today than it was 5 years ago, right? Even a year ago, it's totally different. So the whole hodler of last resort is you, me, and Francesco in the past. Now it's ETFs, it's pension funds, right? You have to remember when IBIT launched, they launched at like $25, right? It's traded up to 60 or something like that. Would we see a drawdown to $12? Like, I don't think so, because that money is even slower moving than a hodler, right? Like, they probably need months to decide to sell, not like panic selling. We're going to sell tomorrow because it crashed. So the structural composition of the hodler is radically different today, and it will become even more radically different in the next year. So I think you have to factor that in when you're saying these things like, oh, it's just going to do the same thing as it did the last two cycles, because it's a very different world today.
I agree. Because many, they are still saying, I will sell at the end of the year because it will be the cycle. But unless, as you said, one thing, if it goes to 1 million or 800K, then if it crashes to 500K, it's not really a crash, because now we are at 80K. But if you go to maybe 200, 250 steadily, it's unlikely that we do 70% drawback for the reasons that you said.
Nobody knows for sure.
Yeah, maybe the clue is that they passed in the US the possibility for banks to hold Bitcoin. So they cannot publicly oppose because the administration is in favor of Bitcoin. So they will do as much as they can to make the ETF to be purchased by their customer or to custody their Bitcoin. So that was the missing point between the connection between the banks and the Bitcoin world, and now has been filled, I think.
But if you go back like a week, they clarified the ruling, so banks can hold now. So everything is moving so
Yes.
quickly, and I think it's just going to keep going at this pace for the next year, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
And also, personal question for me, I'm there since 2020. I never seen such an asymmetric between so many bullish news and so bearish sentiment. It didn't happen in the past. When there was bearish sentiment, it was because there was bearish news, FTX, China, Tesla selling. Now we see so many bullish. Also, the one that you mentioned, the banks that can custody Bitcoin is a huge news. No reaction in the market.
yeah. Well, people are looking for bearish news, right? So now people are like, anytime there's a little bit of a downturn, like a dip, people search actively for reasons to be bearish. And I think it's just, I call it bear market trauma. They can't see the light, and they're just like looking for the darkness. They're trying to find the darkness anywhere they can find it. But I saw something today that someone tweeted out that, last time inflation was high and there were tariffs, Bitcoin dropped a lot. So, people can believe what they're going to believe, but Bitcoin will just do what it's going to do. And in time, you see who is right and who is wrong. But I'm more bullish. I still think, even after all of this stuff that's happened, people don't really know the limit, the absolute scarcity of 21 million coins, right? They just don't know. And all of these initiatives that are being put forth, they're trying to eat into this 21 million cap, of which maybe 4 million coins are lost, maybe 5, who knows. And a lot of it is in long-term cold storage, and a lot of it won't sell at any price. So what happens? Nobody knows, but
We are
something
all
big will
looking.
happen.
We are all waiting for see the effect when it happens. Yes, never
Yeah.
seen in history of humanity. Absolutely scarcity. So actually, very good times to be alive. We can say.
Yeah.
We will experience this. Francesco, you have one last question. It's already almost.
No, I'm as bullish as him. We are witnessing in 10K daily candles, and that's intraday volatility, which is huge. If you have to look into the signal, is the intraday volatility versus the spike, referring to the normal market, to the Nasdaq, is getting tight and tighter to the Nasdaq, to the liquidity, which makes underpins what he's saying, that if the gap is maintained, but the holders are the different species now, that will be slower to sell, and that can be a bigger cycle. Let's not call it otherwise. But
Yeah.
yes, there is a different game. Yeah.
Yeah, Francesco, that's a very good point. Like the God candle, 10K candles are normal now. I think we've had like 9 up and down, but people don't know. Like I still see like haters on Twitter saying, "Where's your God candle?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Where's the God candle? Weren't you looking? Like we went down 13K. Like you're not looking at the God candles."
And then up 12K.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
it's
I
all
mean, I
here.
mean, I mean, if the 10K we are in the early bull market, and that's the 10K is the candle of the early bull market. We compare it to 2017, where it was for the $500, and then it went to $5,000. We're gonna see a 100,000 daily
Yeah.
candle, maybe, and that's
We are.
not a joke.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the chart of the Weimar mark failing and volatility in relation to gold. But it was that chart that shows like the price of gold, price in marks, and it's like this,
Yes.
and then the volatility is like this, like
Yes.
thousands of percentages, right?
Yes.
We're getting to that point. You can kind of see it coming, that like it's almost impossible to trade this market. I've had a lot of traders ping me and say, well, you can't trade this. Like, it's impossible to trade this. Yeah, because when the currency is dying, you get this kind of volatility, and it is very hard to trade that.
Yeah, it's not a good news for the world, but I see we're going that direction. It's very clear to me, and the assets will be acquired and or held move into Bitcoin, and we see how the people will react, because many things can happen. In the US, we are shielded for 4 years, but other countries, you can be guilty. An early Bitcoiner told me, so it could be also dangerous. So let's see how it unfolds.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, then, Samson. It was great to have you here, and looking forward for 2025 news that will come month after month.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thanks,
also, Francesco.
Francesco. Thanks,
Thank you.
Alessandro.
Thank you.